As Christmas approaches, I find myself wondering what the best performance car for a cold British winter might be. I think you want four-wheel drive, at least 600 horsepower, 2 turbos, a luxurious cabin and maybe 2 small seats in the back. Yep, it's got to be a Porsche 911 Turbo S.
I mean, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? A 911 Turbo is the perfect everyday sports car as it is, but it becomes even more appealing in winter. It's got security and stability because of its four-wheel drive. It comes on sensible Pirelli tyres that work well on a cold, wet day. It's got bundles of power and, crucially, torque, enough torque to roast anything else on the road. And best of all, this latest one is better to drive than ever.
Remember to head over to PistonHeads.com after watching this video to research and buy your next car. This latest 911 Turbo S is the fastest and most powerful one yet, now with 650 horsepower. The engine is still a 3.8 litre flat 6 with 2 turbos, the gearbox an 8-speed dual clutch. It'll do more than 200 miles per hour flat out and hit 62 in just 2.7 seconds. Responding to criticism that the previous model was a blunt point and squirt device, Porsche set out to make this one sharper, keener and more engaging to drive, but not any less brilliant to use every day. In fact, the cabin is more sumptuous now than ever. Prices start at £156,000.
So why is this new 992 911 Turbo S so much better to drive than the previous one? The key thing for me is that it's a more engaging kind of car. It's a more rewarding thing to step into and fling at a B road. The previous one was damn capable. It was so fast, fun to drive on track as well actually, but for me on the road, it was just a kind of numb, slightly blunt instrument. And Porsche recognised that during the development of this car. It wanted the 992 to be a sharper sort of thing. No, it isn't suddenly just like a 911 GT3 or even a Carrera GTS. It's still a turbo, but it's got much more incisive steering than the previous car. It's just a more communicative thing overall. You stick it into a corner and you feel the grip, you feel the balance of the car. There's just a two-way interaction going on that you didn't get with the 991 Turbo S. And so, yeah, this new one, it just is more enjoyable to drive on the road. And my God, it's fast. It is astonishingly quick. 911 Turbos always have been, but this one, my word. Of course, there's that four-wheel drive system, massive traction. You just don't worry about traction at all in this car. And grip is mighty. As I said, Pirelli P0 tyres, so it's not like a silly Michelin Cup 2 track focus tyre. It works in the wet, it works on a cold day, and on a dry, warm road, it's got, I think, as much grip as you could really need. It's even got good balance, and it's so planted on the road. Honestly, there's barely any body roll. It clings onto the road so hard. Body control is out of this world. And then there's the power. 650 horsepower. Oh my God, it's almost, it's violently accelerative. It really strains your neck with how fast it lunges at the horizon. And this engine doesn't feel at all like the smaller 3-litre engine that you get in the Carrera models, and that's important. It still feels distinctly turbocharged. In a Carrera, we know that those Carrera models now have twin turbos as well, but I want those engines to feel like a naturally aspirated engine. I want that very linear, rising power delivery. But in a proper turbo, I want that power and torque to arrive in a big rush. I want it to feel turbocharged, and this engine does. So yeah, the 911 Turbo S is faster than ever, but importantly, it's more engaging and rewarding to drive than the previous one. So what's it like as an everyday sports car, as a Grand Tourer? I think it's really impressive, particularly when you put it in normal mode. This particular car doesn't have the optional sport suspension, and so the ride is actually lovely and plush, particularly around town. It just smothers the worst of the road surface. It's really pleasant, actually. I like that a lot. And visibility is good. The seats are comfortable. It's not hard to drive. The only thing that sort of nibbles away at its Grand Tourer credentials is the amount of tyre roll you get on the motorway. It's really quite pronounced. You've got 4 big fat tyres slapping the road at speed. And so there is quite a lot of tyre roar that just sort of resonates around the cabin. It's not enough that it's unbearable, but it is enough that it stops it being a supreme Grand Tourer. But a 911 Turbo S isn't for everybody, I get that. And so if that's you, let me propose to you another sports car that I think is perfect for a British winter.
What, you thought I'd forgotten about the Bentley? This is the brand new Speed, which uses Bentley's 6-litre twin-turbo W12 engine. It's got twice the number of cylinders, but the same power as the Porsche. The weight difference is staggering. The Bentley is 600 kilograms heavier. That's an entire Caterham 7 with a driver. Still, with 4-wheel drive and an 8-speed dual clutch, again, just like the 911, it'll reach 62 in 3.8 seconds and top out at 208 miles per hour. We know Porsche set out to make the new 911 Turbo S the most dynamic one yet. Here, Bentley has done exactly the same thing. It calls this new Continental GT Speed the most dynamic road car in its 101-year history. It has clever new hardware like all-wheel steering and an electronically controlled LSD in the rear axle, plus existing tech like adaptive dampers and active roll control to make this more agile than any Continental GT before it. The 4-wheel drive system has been recalibrated to the same end too. It costs £210,000.
If this isn't the best interior of any car this side of £250,000, I don't know what is. I think it's beautiful in here. The quality of the materials, the fit and finish, lovely details. This being a Speed model, it doesn't have sort of old-fashioned traditional wood veneer. It's got this glossy piano black finish here, and then this machined aluminium surface across the dash and along the door tops as well. It's also got an Alcantara steering wheel, or at least half Alcantara. The inside is still leather. This spec has quite a lot going on. There are lots of different textures and materials and finishes. All this green and brown leather with the stitching and the quilting. There's quite a lot to sort of get your head around. I'm not necessarily sure I love the spec, but the interior itself is just supreme. And when you've had enough of looking at the digital display, you hit that button and you just get 3 simple, beautiful clocks. That's a thermometer, that one's a compass, useful, and that one's a stopwatch. And then press the button and you get your screen back. It's lovely. It's so serene and so relaxing in here that I might just make the most of it for a moment. They have their similarities, that Porsche and this Bentley. They're both 2-door coupes with little seats in the back, both 4-wheel drive, both twin turbo. Exactly the same amount of power, 650. But they're the similarities sort of end, because when you step from the 911 into the Conti GT, you realise just how different they are. You sit so much higher in this car. You feel like there's so much more vehicle around you. It immediately feels heavier. And while that Porsche tends to make quite a lot of tyre roar on the motorway, this thing is almost silent. It's got double glazed windows, brilliant noise suppression, tyre roar, wind noise. It's just so serene and soothing. But it's not just a big wallowy old bus at all, not by any means. In fact, compared to the previous Continental GT Speed, it's light years ahead as a driver's car. How so? Well, despite the sort of impression that the previous car would give you with the way it looked, with its weight, with its 4-wheel drive system, with everything that you know about it, you expect that car to be rock solid, to have boundless stability. But when you started driving the previous Conti GT Speed quickly along a road, particularly a slightly greasy one, you realised that it actually didn't have the stability you expected it to have, nor the grip. It felt very nose heavy and light at the rear. So you could turn it into a corner and find that the rear of the car wants to come around. It wouldn't power oversteer, but on the way into a bend, it would get all unsteady and a bit crossed up, a bit like an 80s hot hatch. And when that happens, and I learned this the hard way, it could become quite an unruly thing. And so it was difficult to ever build your confidence in that car, to ever have enough confidence to drive it with any enthusiasm. And that's where this new one is just leaps and bounds ahead. It's so stable, so planted, so secure. And you have that confidence in it. You turn into a corner, it feels more agile than you expect it to, and the rear end is just as planted and secure as the front. There's masses of grip. Actually, you can fling this thing into a bend at alarming speeds, and it just holds on. Given its weight, it really doesn't roll that much at all. Body control is brilliant. And of course, on these air springs, and particularly in comfort mode, the ride is unbelievably good. One of the best rides of any modern road car. It's brilliant. Even the steering, when you drive with some enthusiasm, is pretty good. It's sharp, it's accurate, it gives you a sense of the grip. Let's talk about the W12 engine, because it is a masterpiece. We've often said that the V8 Continental GT is the one to have because it's lighter, it's a great engine, and you don't really need any more performance. And I think that probably is true, but this engine is still wonderful nonetheless. So smooth, so responsive. It's just got acres of power and torque all the way through the rev range. And it even sounds pretty good, albeit in a slightly remote, distant kind of way. Of course, weighing so much more than the Porsche, this Bentley doesn't feel as urgent in a straight line. It's got the same power, but loads more weight. But it's still flipping brisk, given how big and heavy it is. As a Grand Tourer, I just don't think there's a better one out there at the moment. I truly don't. It's staggering how comfortable and refined and civilized this thing is on the motorway or around town. And then how keenly it sort of picks up its skirts and gets going along a B road. That is the super clever bit. That's the bit that the previous version never quite did. Now, compared to that 911 Turbo S, no. It isn't a proper driver's car. It's nothing like as exciting, as rewarding as the Porsche. But given how wonderful it is just to drive long distances or to use every day, I think it's bloody good. I think the interesting thing about getting these two cars together, it's that the Porsche doesn't have the sport suspension option, so that is the most comfortable version of the 911 Turbo S. And this is the most outright sporting version of the W12 Continental GT. So these two variants of these cars sort of get closer to meeting in the middle than any other two variants. And they have their similarities. We've run through a few of those already. But in truth, the difference between these two cars is enormous. The other lasting impression that I have from driving these two cars back to back is that each one is comfortably a greater achievement than their predecessors.
What do we learn by bringing these two very different four-wheel drive Grand Tourers together? First, both Porsche and Bentley have made their Grand Tourers more rewarding to drive without forgetting what makes them GT cars in the first place. I'm also reminded that the basic principles of physics will always apply, no matter how much technology you throw at a car. Clever hardware makes the Continental GT Speed more engaging than ever, but a lower, lither car that's 600 kilograms lighter will always be more fun to drive. Still, no matter what flavour of winter performance coupe you like best, Porsche and Bentley have you covered better now than ever before. Thanks for watching. Please remember to subscribe to the PistonHeads YouTube channel and give this video a thumbs up.